So he was giving a talk at a local Baptist church, and when I was in the midst of the throes of this crisis, thinking about priesthood and ministry, thinking about philosophy, that I went to hear Bobby Bowden speak, and he gave his testimony of an awareness in his life that whenever he came to critical moments in his life, he made the deliberate and conscientious effort to ask the question, where is Christ directing me to go with this? And it was, again, sort of a providential and bombshell moment of being in the midst of all of this sort of, all of these questions, and feeling like Bobby Bowden was having a one-on-one conversation with me, where he was telling me, you know, you're at a significant moment of crisis in your life. Have you asked yourself where Christ is calling you to go? And the room was full with hundreds of people, and yet it was like he was talking to me. And as a result of that, it really thrusted me into this direction of pursuing philosophy, continuing to be active at the Episcopal University Center, and asking more and more questions about my faith. It was also, unfortunately, at this time that the Episcopal Church was going through really significant upheaval in its own national struggle, in its own national identity, and was causing, although the Episcopal Church had any number of different controversies before this, it really came to be the sort of almost the moment of the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was a critical moment that caused the Episcopal University Center in that community, Father Brad Page, and the local Episcopal Church to decide to say, we can no longer stand or tolerate the direction of the National Episcopal Church. We will leave, and we will be united to what is called the Anglican Church of North America. We will take our toys and we will go somewhere else and we will play over here. I don't mean to be so flippant about that, but it was, in one sense, that sort of very Protestant idea. We don't really like what's going on, so we're going to separate and go do our own thing. Again, here are these little, very similar things. The faith that has been training me and making me to understand and appreciate more, but then these other little bits about theology and history and doctrine and practice and execution that are the little things that are just slightly different, that maybe say, is this the fullness of the truth, or is this just a bit of it? That Episcopal community went through a split, and I continued on to the Anglican Church of North America. I continued to grow and develop in my faith, and then really steps into the foreground another priest named Father Michael Petty. He's a Catholic-making machine, this man. Though still an Anglican Church of North American priest right now, God, I don't know why you have kept Michael Petty in the Anglican Church of North America, but he has, of basically all my peers at Florida State, almost every single one of them are Catholic, and largely because of his influence. So maybe that's the reason God has kept him in the church, or in the ACNA. Father Michael Petty continued this eloquent and well thought out and deliberate form of faith that I saw in Brad Page, and Michael helped to put me under his wing and helped to guide me and answer so many questions. As you might guess, Florida State does not have a very robust Catholic school of theology. It's a very modernist and very kind of historical critical school of theology, a school of religion. So I was confronted with all of these really challenging questions about modern critics of religion. And yet Father Michael was present to really walk me through all of the rational counter-arguments to every single one of the modern critics of religion. As Father Michael helped to guide me intellectually, my college priest, Father John Wallace, dramatically helped me to also grow liturgically and spiritually. A man who is also still an Anglican Church of North America priest, but he and the love of his wife and the family, I think, tapped into this really deep sense of the domestic part of the faith that I had in my family, and allowed me to share a little bit more in seeing the faithfulness of this family desiring to live after Christ and to follow Him. So as Father Brad Page and Dr. Steve Payne sort of faded to the back as things were changing in my life, Father Michael and Father John Wallace sort of stepped to the foreground and continued to help guide and instruct me. But the closer and closer that I got to this question of feeling like I'm really beginning to identify who I am and what I want to do and and what God is calling me to do and how I can love and serve Him and His church, I was encountering this rather critical question of this just doesn't gel. It just doesn't make sense. The intellectual side of where I was beginning with Father Michael Petty to read St. Athanasius' book on the Incarnation, work through church history, work through the Summa Theologica with him, this one-on-one directed study that we were doing, I kept confronting historical questions of the church, theological questions about the belief of sacred scripture and its interpretation, where the authority of the church is held, and the validity and the communion that we share in the sacraments. And just feeling like at every point Anglicanism dropped the ball. But Roman Catholicism stepped into the gap and said, but here's another way to look at it. Here's a more coherent way to look at it. Here's a way to begin to see that this is a deeply historical and an intellectually robust faith that we have in our Catholic faith. And it's there that I began to feel this dramatic pull and tug in my life to need to convert. This was around the time of 2010, 2011. Anglicanorum Cedibus, which is a foundational document that Pope Benedict wrote, was written in 2009, but I didn't really have a sense of that yet. And it didn't even exist in North America until 2012. So it wasn't even anything that was really on my radar of anywhere I could go or do anything with. But I was enmeshed and immersed into this Anglican community, but feeling like I needed to convert. So I ended up going to one of the local Catholic churches, Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church in Tallahassee, Florida, and feeling this pain, again, almost this sort of existential crisis of, I'm so at home, immersed in this liturgical life, the spiritual life, this community of friends, Father Brad Page, or Father John Wallace, Father Michael Petty, and this community of friends that I have. And yet I'm going to Mass at the Catholic Church, not receiving the sacraments or anything, but feeling like there's this huge disconnect. I felt as though I was trying to artificially transplant myself out of this pot and put myself into another pot, and yet still keep, like, my vines were still trying to, like, keep connected. And it wasn't working. And the liturgy was awful.
Blessed Sacrament.
Yes, a Blessed Sacrament. I got into a discussion with the priest there, Father Richard, and unfortunately, either the way that I expressed it or maybe he perceived what I was saying, it became almost sort of like his apologetic effort to explain why the Catholic liturgy is so bad and why you should just sort of get used to that. Why I should just get used to that. Unfortunately, that did not work very well as all the emotional crisis that I was going through of feeling like I was transplanting myself out of this community. So it was this moment where I realized and recognized there's something very similar here to the Catholic Church. There's something similar to the way that the Anglican Church has given me and fostered in me the faith, the liturgy, the reverence of the sacraments, a sense of hierarchy. But there's something just different enough that I'm not in communion with the Catholic Church. And here at this moment, God in His providence and His grace got through my thick skull and shared with me that I need to do something as a deliberate act of moving away from this community so that I can then immerse myself into the Catholic Church. That turning point was the decision to go to an Anglican seminary, Nashotah House Theological Seminary in Nashotah, Wisconsin. It is a theological seminary that trains its students in the Anglican or the Episcopal background. And I knew that I needed to go there because there was something that it deeply resonated with the sense of beauty and reverence of the liturgy, the importance of study and theology, this work and prayer that they were doing, this very Benedictine model, ora et labora, work and prayer going on that had to be a continual step of discernment. And it was a really critical moment of a leap of faith because almost in one sense like wanting to become a masseuse, I didn't really know exactly where I was going or what I wanted to do. Going to Nashotah was sort of a step into, why are you going there? Do you want to become an Episcopalian priest? Or an Anglican priest? And yet I stepped there, and it was a process of discernment that only further solidified me in my desire for the Catholic faith, but all the more solidly placed me in an understanding of Anglican and Episcopalian liturgy and worship. 10 minutes. Yeah, and that helped to really make for me the real concrete way of giving this point of transition away from my community in Tallahassee up to Wisconsin, so that then after I graduated, I moved. And when I graduated in 2014, the ordinariate had arrived in North America, and it was growing a bit more strongly, developing a bit more. So I moved from Wisconsin to Greenville, South Carolina. Again, on this sort of leap of faith of knowing that I had to go from this point of transition into my desire to be received into full communion. It was there at Greenville, South Carolina, that I became a part and was confirmed and received into St. Anselm's ordinariate Catholic community, and I was confirmed and received on October 5th of 2014. So very shortly after I graduated from Nashotah House in May of 2014, I was confirmed and received in October of 2014.